And the first question I have for you is, do you teach?
I do teach.
Obviously, yeah, you do teach. I heard that already.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
actually been teaching quite a long time. Believe it or not, I'm one of these people that started teaching when I was very young, and by very young I mean 16 years old. So
Wow.
that was, well, without really revealing my age, uh, that was over 30 years ago.
Wow.
And I was teaching a variety of things, stringed instruments, bowed string instruments. And it wasn't folk music, that wasn't old time. At that time, it was more, I guess you kind of consider it kind of loosely classical if you had to really
Yeah.
classify the style.
Were you classically trained?
Yes and no. So playing violin by myself. Just picked it up by myself. Picked up I had a school instructor. We had a very, very limited music program in the public school system that I went to. And basically, it was just giving a part of our recess hour. What kid wants to do that? And I think I was about 9 years old. And it was just basically basic stuff, how to hold the instrument, little things like that. I think they maybe even gave us Mary Had a Little Lamb or something, and it was written
Right.
down. That was really pretty much it. But I took it upon myself to continue and basically taught myself from that. And then I went to the other bowed string instruments. Next was upright bass, and then I played a cello, keyboard, and viola. I was in my senior year of high school when I learned to play viola. Well, I picked it up by myself, and there was a school orchestra, and the orchestra teacher said she encouraged me. I wrote music and such like that. And we played the compositions and such in school, and she encouraged me to audition for Cleveland State University for the music program. And I just kind of sat there like, well, I don't have a teacher. I don't. I knew what I was doing, but like feeling that I didn't have a teacher like a lot of the other kids did, I felt like I was less than anybody else. I just kind of did my own thing, and I auditioned and I made it. So
Yeah.
that was where I started actually really learning classical music.
Wow.
But I actually had real lessons on viola though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you went to college, and did you major in music or something?
I
Or
did. Yes, I studied music history, musicology, education, composition, pretty much the whole 9 yards with it. Yeah, I got
wow.
involved in early music, but again, same thing. We had early music consorts there, and they allowed us to use the instruments, and they basically would just say, here's a viola da gamba, learn it. When you learn it, play something, and we'll put you in the group if you're ready. And that's kind of how it happened for me.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Um, there's another fiddler around Ohio, Christian House, Chris House. He does a creative strings academy,
Hmm.
and I don't know where in Ohio he is, but he's up in Ohio somewhere. Gosh, I don't know. I did an interview with him a couple of times, and yeah, so he has an unusual story, but he's in my magazine. You can read all about him there. He's pretty
Oh,
good.
sure. I'll be
Yeah.
interested to do that.
I was reading somewhere on that you learn tunes by listening to them. You're more audio instead of the dots
I'll
and
do.
the notes. Is that right?
Yeah, I do both. But my preferred method of learning a tune is by source recordings, actually.
Yeah.
It took me a little bit to get to that point, I have to say. I would generally, prior to that, I would generally learn tunes from other fiddlers in jams and such like that, and going to
Yeah.
different festivals and stuff like that. And I was always there with my Zoom, asking people, is it okay if I put a Zoom in a jam? Of course, people oblige, they don't mind that.
Yeah.
And I'd learn the tune on the fly, but then you forget so many things, and I bring it home and I learn that, and that was great. And then so many people, friends of mine, were talking about the source recordings, and my experience with those prior to that was just kind of like, oh, it's so hard for me to tell what they're doing, and the quality of the recordings sometimes and such like that. But then I really, really started to focus on those things. And the more I focused and listened to those source recordings, I actually got to, in a way, know certain fiddlers. John Salyer, French Carpenter, Hiram Stamper, and a lot of these fiddlers. They had some very interesting and unusual tunes. And I think by listening and really focusing in on these specific fiddlers, and then going to other ones, I kind of got the gist of what they're doing, and the source recordings made a lot more sense to me. I
Yeah.
didn't aim to copy their sound, but just to get the tune. I will also learn tunes from the dots. Generally, that is though if there are no recordings of a tune, and I think it's a really cool tune. A lot of the tunes in Marion Thedy's fiddle book, none of those have been recorded. Very few, I should say, very few recordings exist. Actual source recordings of those. There are
Yeah.
some recordings of the Collins family playing some of those tunes, but for the vast majority of those tunes, there are no recordings. So I
Right.
do the dots to learn those. Um, but it's an interpretation.
Yeah.
It's not like you're just reading that music and playing it, and it's literally like interpreting a language. It is. You're not playing exactly what's on that page. And
Right.
I use them to learn the tune itself, to get an understanding of the tune, the structure of the tune, the skeleton of the tune, if you will. I play it,
Yeah.
play it, get it in my head, put the dots away. They're no longer used. And I play that tune and play it more and more to the point where I feel confident enough playing with other people. And then we start
Right.
jamming on it, and then the tune really takes on life and it starts to really live and evolve.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. Where do you get the source recordings? Archives of
Yeah,
National
Berea
Archives?
College website is great. I rely a lot on my friend Larry Warren. His Slippery Hill is just an amazing site, and I'm always shoving that in there in my descriptions of tune of the week because Larry has really took on a big task there in presenting and having all these recordings for us in one spot. And I think that's a really important thing because we can go on the internet and again go on Berea College website, go on there's Appalachia websites, there are Library of Congress things, but a lot of those things Larry has all in one place on
Wow,
his
that's good.
site. So that is just an amazing resource that is really a wonderful thing that he shared with everybody.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Um, who are some of your musical heroes?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are so many. I have to say again, kind of going back to what I mentioned before about really, really listening to the source recordings with a different ear, I would say, rather than just, oh wow, that sounds so scratchy, or wow,
Yeah.
that's the recording is a little rough, not considering Hiram Stamper was like 90 years old when he was playing this tune. I take these things into
Right.
consideration. But I'd have to say, really, I really love John Salyer's playing and his tunes. French Carpenter is another. I never. Aisha Monday is another. Love not only his tunes but the sound of his fiddle, the very archaic sound, and trying to really understand what he was doing because he's droning a lot. He's playing on more than two strings at a time, but it almost sounds like he is fingering two strings at a time sometimes, and he's getting kind of like a drone, but then he's also getting kind of like the sound of two strings being played fingered together. Real
Yeah.
unusual stuff. So those are some of the fiddlers I really would I really look up to, and I can't say I try to necessarily model myself after them, but I let them influence me,
Yeah.
and they're a motivation for me for sure.
Did you have any mentors growing up? That anybody that mentored you or?
You know what? I actually did not. And
Wow.
it's interesting you mentioned that because I often think about that. I've had discussions like this with some friends, and again, talking about who are our influences, mentors, and stuff like that.
Right.
And I really, honestly, never did. I listened to music. I read music even back then because I taught myself really to read music
Yeah.
so well that I could sight read very well, and even to this day, I can sight read at dance tempo. And I played in many contra dance bands where, I was in another state. I was up in New England, not knowing what their tunes were. There were a lot of tunes I didn't know, and I would be reading them out of the book, at dance tempo. So I can sight read very fluently. But as for mentors back then, I really didn't have any, and it kind of surprises me that I continued with music with such a fervor because I really didn't have many people to look up to,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and I kind of wish that I had. Yeah, I wonder how things would be different for me if I really did have somebody to look up to musically, but
Wow.
I didn't though.
Yeah. Are you mentoring anybody now? Any of your students
Oh,
or
absolutely. Yes. I hesitate to use that word about myself. I only will bring up people that have actually told me that I am a mentor to them, or they use that word
right?
to describe me. To
Yes,
me, it's something that is it's almost sacred in a way,
it
to be a
is. That's
mentor.
right. Yeah, I agree.
And you could be a teacher, you could be an inspiration, but to me, being a mentor is it's all of that and then even more. It's
It's
it's it's a
right.
it's a it's a guide. It's almost like a parent in a way. You are leading this person
Yeah.
musically, and yes, I am very humbled and proud to have been called a mentor by several of my students, and so that is again, it's very humbling and it's a very wonderful feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You do a lot of cross tuning and tuning low and all that stuff.
Oh yes.
Uh, when you're reading, when you yeah, you've heard of that Sarah Armstrong. She did a whole book of things
Oh,
and tunes and stuff.
Bayard's book. Yes.
And some of those tunes are tuned different, but it doesn't show they're tuned different. How
Yeah.
do you know? How do you know
Yeah.
other
Well,
than listening to them?
yeah, yeah, exactly, and that's a very good question, Mike, and a good point too. In that we don't have any source recordings of Sarah Armstrong. Now, apparently, there were some. Bayard mentions though that the family recorded her playing tunes. Again, what became of those things, we have no idea. So what we then can look at that, and again, anything historically, we look at we can look at other fiddlers and other
Yeah.
fiddlers of that generation. We can listen to source recordings that do exist, and we hear a lot of the older fiddlers were tuned low. Aisha Monday, for example, he tuned quite low, like normally what we call things tuning cross A E A E.
Yeah.
He was tuned right around FC FC, so he was like two whole steps below what traditionally is done today. Marcus Martin, he tuned low as well, generally maybe a step and a half lower.
Mhm.
Um, it was common. It was common practice then. The standardized 440A that we all, pretty much all of us use now,
Yeah.
really was not a standard. And as I understand it, again, studying this stuff, it really wasn't an music industry standard until in the 20th century. I do a lot of other research in not just music, but also decorative arts and antiques and such like that. And part of what I was doing one day, I was looking through Montgomery Ward and Sears catalogs. I was trying to get an idea for tuners, because hey, a lot of people, order their fiddles and such right out of the Montgomery Wards and Sears catalogs. A lot of
Yeah.
people out in very rural areas did not
Right.
have access to a lot of home things, so they ordered out of the catalog. So I thought, hey, good idea. Let's see what they were offering in the music section, and I discovered that in the late 1890s, it seemed I didn't have all consecutive issues, but consecutive enough to see that it appeared that they were starting to offer tuners, pitch pipes in the late 1890s, and they specifically mentioned new high pitch. So here we go. We don't know exactly what that was, but assuming a high pitch, probably something close to a 440A, if not a 440A.
Yeah.
So there is at least some evidence there of lower tunings being employed. We listen to Hiram Stamper played. He tuned very low. A lot of these older fiddlers, obviously they learned when they were much younger. These
Oh,
were things they were carrying over. I mentioned studying early music, and there are lots of parallels that I see with early music and fiddle music.
yeah.
And it's not even just in the technique, but it is literally holding the violin, the fiddle on your arm rather than on your shoulder. The Baroque bows, holding it up higher, choking up high in the bow. There's a lot of parallels. Another parallel is the low tuning. Earlier strings were gut. They couldn't take the tension of the metal strings. And also this construction of the instrument too was such that the tunings were lower. So a lot of the parallels of, say, the 18th century violin and the fiddle carried over to a lot of the old-time fiddlers. You got to figure if they're playing and they're learning 19th century, they're learning from older fiddlers, how many of them would have played on an old violin that was not modernized? Modernizing meaning in the late 18th century, the whole instrument was kind of revamped. The angle of the neck was changed, the bridge higher, construction thing, to make the instrument stronger so that it was able to hold more tension, higher tunings, it was able to project more, it was able to be louder.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think about learning regional tunes? You know, like there's Texas fiddling, there's Appalachian fiddling, there's Missouri fiddling.
Yeah.
Canadian fiddling. You know, the regional areas. Do you learn whatever? Do you stick with one region, or are you all over the place?
I'm probably all over the place. In fact, I know I'm all over the place. It's an interesting thing. A couple things. So I would always approach this from a standpoint of, I like the tune, and I hear a tune and I like the tune. That causes me to want to learn it. That causes me to want to become a part of me, and then it just becomes a tune that I play. That I'll go to jams, I'll teach it to people, I'll incorporate it into lessons and such like that. And along the way, you know, I would hear friends say, "Oh, they're really into Kentucky tunes, and they'll only play Kentucky tunes, and they'll only play Missouri tunes." You know, you know, again, outside of maybe being a jam, but that is really their focus. And I always thought to myself, "Wow, you know, that just to me it just seems so narrow." I understood the concept, I understood why, and I thought to myself, "Well, I don't do that at all." And then I started to really analyze the tunes that I played. I started looking at my tune list, and how many of the tunes that I play just happen to be from Kentucky. So I guess I really like the Kentucky tunes for some reason, not even realizing it. But I don't try to go for any specific style. And the way I look at it, the main reason I'd say is that I don't think I would do it justice, to be honest with you. So to play a Missouri tune in an authentic, if we can use that word, you know, traditional way that they would in Missouri is very different than they would play something in Texas. It's very different than something they would play in West Virginia. Now, some of the tunes are the same tunes. A lot of these tunes that ended up in the Ozarks and ended up in Oklahoma, especially I'm finding out with Marion Thedius' fiddle book and studying that even more. Some of those fiddlers studying their lives, they actually came from out east. A fiddler named J.S. Price was born in Mississippi, and his family moved to Texas by 1900. Not a whole lot going on out there. And then they moved to, he was in Oklahoma, say by 1910, 1912. So obviously a lot of those tunes were brought out there, but they would be played differently in different areas. I just feel like it would be too much trying to copy somebody if I were to say, okay, now I'm going to play a Kentucky tune and I'm going to play it in Kentucky style. Who am I going to follow? Am I going to model after John Sayer? Am I going to model after Hiram Stamper? Am I going to model after Esta Bingham? Even within those regions of states, there are so many different styles. It boggles the mind, right? So I think I just kind of go for it. I listen to the tune. I try to understand the tune. I try to get the structure of the tune in my brain. And like I said before, just through playing it and playing and playing it, I think we have our own individual styles. And fiddle playing to me is like it's our language. It is language. And I just kind of feel like if I were to try to play something like somebody else, I would be imitating them. Like imitating somebody's voice, to me is, yes, it could be considered flattery, but to put on an accent, so to speak, music has an accent to it, a specific accent, I feel like I would be just kind of like a minor bird, just imitating them. And I feel that it would actually be true to me or a part of me. So I will learn the tunes, but as to the regional styles, I understand and appreciate them, but I don't take that upon myself to try to be like that.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because, you know, in fact, probably a lot of people do that. You know, how do you make a tune your own? You know, you listen to these tunes from all over the country, all over the world, really. And, you know, there are Scottish tunes and Irish tunes and, you know, and I've heard people play St. Anne's Reel and like a breakdown kind of deal, and
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great. And if we think about that, what you just said there, and go back maybe 200 years, 250 years maybe even, and think of the settlers coming over here. They brought their music with them. Okay. So now we're in a new country and we're playing the music, probably as we play it. What other influences did they have that? How much did the music change in their hands from when they learned it from whomever? And I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Is sometimes people will talk about again the word again authenticity and playing it like this person, this regional style, with the
right,
assumption it was always like that. But what we have are source recordings, which we're very fortunate to have, but we are literally listening to a fiddler playing a tune in this little given point of time. It's a slice of time, but we don't know what the person who he learned that tune from, how he
right,
played it, or she maybe,
yeah,
or if he learned it from his father or grandfather, how many generations before this person played it, and what did they sound like playing it? We don't know.
right.
So that tune, I feel, and honestly, I mean, without knowing 100%, I feel that their personalities were in these tunes.
Oh,
And I say that
absolutely.
with some confidence because listen to
Yeah,
John Salyer's playing. Listen, and again, getting to know these specific fiddlers and hearing parallels in tunes. He'll do a certain little figure. French Carpenter will do a certain little figure in this tune, this tune, this tune. Not saying that tune sounds exactly like the others or that they're necessarily related musically,
right.
but I think those were their little touches that they personally did on these tunes, and that's why they pop up in this tune, that tune, and the other tune.
Okay, yeah,
It's
that
a
makes sense. Absolutely, yeah.
had to put their
Uh,
mark on their own tunes.
yeah, yeah. What kind of fiddle are you playing, and what kind of strings and bow do you use?
Yeah. Oh, well, let's see. I'll talk about strings. I do tend to prefer prims. I was turned on to prims several years ago from some old time music friends. Just kind of, same thing. You'll hear somebody playing a fiddle, and you'll say, "Wow, what's your fiddle?" Just like you asked, what do you use? I
Yeah,
love your sound. And so I have defaulted to prims. Every fiddle is going to sound a little different with different strings, right? But I
yeah,
find prims are pretty even across the board, if you will. They settle in quickly. They work very well with cross tunings. Tuning up, tuning down. They break in very quickly.
yeah.
As to fiddles, so what I have been playing on lately, again through the generosity of friends who have gifted me these instruments, um, and I have the few fiddles that I have that were gifts to me that I really love are American-made fiddles. A wonderful gentleman named Chris Haddocks in West Virginia, Morgantown, West Virginia. He gave me a fiddle that was made in Bexley, West Virginia, in the early 1900s. A maker named John Tutterway, who was a immigrant from Hungary, I believe.
Wow.
And oh, that fiddle is sweet. It is a very, very sweet sounding fiddle. It looks beautiful. I love the way it feels. And that's an important part of it to me. It
Yeah,
isn't just the sound, but I really have to feel this instrument. I'm connected to it. I really
yeah,
do. They each have their own personality, and just the feel of it, just looking at the wood, and just that's why I like the older fiddles too,
yeah.
because there is a voice there. There's a history there that you can't get in a fiddle that was just made yesterday. You're putting that into it,
Oh,
but
yeah.
what I'm gathering from it is its energy. Bows actually. You know, I actually have been using Baroque violin bow lately, and I actually have one here. I can show you what it looks like.
Sure, sure, yeah,
Yeah. So talking about early music and the
yeah,
parallels and such like that. So this is a Baroque violin bow, and some of the more noticeable features. Again, this may be a more decorative thing, but they are more pointed at the top. But
yeah,
they're shorter. They're much shorter, and you notice they're not as So the bowing of it, it
yeah,
doesn't go this way. Baroque violin, basically, it's even tighter. So it's a more taut stick. The stick is more taut, but we have a lot of flexibility with it. I tend to tighten a little less. They do choke up higher. The frog is not used, again, like a classical violinist would do. So it is a shorter bow. The balance point's a little different. I just find it very, very light and easy to use. So that is actually my preferred bow of recent. Recent, I should say, probably within the last year.
That looks like a Johann Sebastian Bach's bow right there.
Yeah, exactly, right? So with the low tunings and using a Baroque bow, I feel at home. I really do.
Oh, yeah, heck yeah. What kind of music you listening to these days?
Oh, gosh. What I listen to? I've been listening to a lot of Bruce Green recordings, actually. And just, again, trying to get a different influences. Different, just nuances within the music, different tunes, of course, too. Obviously Bruce Green collected a lot of tunes and a lot of amazing tunes. So a lot of times I will just put this stuff on literally in the background as I'm doing something else. I'm doing the dishes. And I find for me, that's a really good way to absorb tunes. Literally, instead of just listening to it with the intent of, I'm going to learn this tune, I just put it on. And I just have it on, and it's almost a subliminal thing, to the point that where it's like sometimes that tune just comes out. Like I'll pick up my fiddle, no intention of playing one of those tunes. I'll just play a tune, and just somehow it's subliminal. Those tunes will come out. So a lot of Bruce Green lately. I've also been listening to a lot of the Mississippi tunes from Harry Bollock's book, the Mississippi Fiddle Tunes and Songs from the 1930s. Mainly because I just purchased the download. And again, the intent there was really to tunes and study the fiddlers, but it's great music. So I've been having that on in the background a lot. I hate to say I don't listen to a lot of modern fiddlers. I do. I like to try to focus on a lot of different things. I'm really going to go towards something. I have to say it's probably going to be Source Recordings of Isham Monday or W.S. Collins before it's going to be a modern fiddler. And don't get me wrong, I love modern fiddling, and there's a lot of wonderful modern fiddlers. Tatiana Hargraves, who you did an interview on her. Yeah. Love her playing. My friend Becca Wintle in Devon, England, love her playing. Jake Blunt, good friend of mine, love his playing. Judy Hyman, David Braggart, a lot of wonderful new fiddlers, modern fiddlers out there. Jimmy Triplett is another favorite of mine. So I guess I do. It's just a matter of what's there at any given time and what I'm doing.
How often do you practice? Do you practice every day, or?
I don't practice at all.
You play every day?
Yeah, yes, that's exactly it. I don't call it practicing. And this is one of the things that I talk about with my students is that don't worry about practicing. Really, you play. Practicing, to me, that word just kind of, it insinuates that you're going over something, you're working on it to perfect in some way. Practicing. Yeah. You're just playing tunes. Hey, the end result may be the same thing, but the mindset is different. It's the same thing like if you got a gig coming up and you're getting together to rehearse. No, let's get together and let's just go over some tunes, is what I say.
Yeah. So, right.
But yes, I do it every day. I have to say. Now there's some days where sometimes you just can't fit it in. So if let's say I'll go a day or two without it, I'll sometimes kind of binge play then, and I do have time.
Right.
And I'm a late night person, so I'll go pretty late sometimes. So I think it kind of balances it out.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Paul, I think that's about all the questions I have for right now.
Okay.
So yeah, this has been a very interesting. You're a very interesting fiddler in person. It's great talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, I've learned a lot from your tune of the week. Listening to some of those things that you play, those old tunes. I'm going, wow. I haven't heard a lot of them. Like Devilish Mary or.
Yeah.
That's a good tune, and
different versions of that. So the Fate Morrison one is probably the more common of the two. It's not common, but the Jubal Anderson one from Marion Thedy's fiddle book. A lot of those tunes from her fiddle book, like I mentioned, there's no recordings of these, and it's hard for me to believe this, but I've looked and I've looked and I've looked, and some of those, I'd have to say, many of those tunes that we've played are the only recordings out there, especially definitely on the internet. Yeah. Larry Ward has actually even put some of our recordings on his Slippery Hill site, which again, great honor to me. What is recordings of these things?
What is the site of the Slippery Hill site? What is it? Is it slipperyhills.com or?
Yeah, slippery dash. There's a dash between it. So www.slippery-hill.com.
Okay, yeah. I want to put that in there so people can find that.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I also I give workshops, and I've been doing those, like I mentioned before. I've been doing those using Facebook as a platform. I'm thinking of going over to YouTube to do it that way, just to kind of tie it all together on YouTube. But I'm still just trying to get used to the platform on there. I guess you need like encoders and stuff. The sound of the fiddle on there going YouTube live was just horrifying. It was just terrible. So I got to work on it.
Is it when you do Skype lessons? Does the fiddle sound bad?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. It sounds really pretty good. And I have to say, Facebook Live sounded good too. It just somehow with YouTube, it just you gonna play me something?
So let me just see what this sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
How does that sound?
It's awesome.
It does?
Fine. Yeah, it sounds very clear. It sounded warm. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was just wondering because I've heard different people say, "Yeah, I do Skype lessons or Zoom, but the audio is just like wow." But if it sounds pretty good,
I think I'm here. I mean, I got my fiddle here. I can play you a little bit. You tell me if it sounds all right.
Okay.
Honestly, with Zoom, you have to change some of the settings from what I've learned. It could be really harsh. And if you go into Zoom, there's different settings, like there's natural, there's whatever, there's different settings.
Yeah.
But this is automatic. I think it's...
Wow, that sounded good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for a platform that you don't have to go in and adjust any settings, obviously Skype has, like you said, they all have kind of issues. Sometimes there's a lag, and I'll notice sometimes in lessons, it depends on, either end. Like my end can be very, very strong. Like I said, I'm connected right into the router, so I should be pretty good. But if the other person has they're out, in the country or something, they don't have such a good connection, it'll be a little pixelated and maybe just kind of a little lag to it. But my experience with it is it's not really all that bad considering.
Yeah. Heck yeah, man, that sounded good. I mean, I thought I'd never really done that before, on a Skype, because I don't really teach, but, it sounded good. I may start teaching now. I don't know.
That's awesome, Mike. Yeah, not bad at all. Not bad at all.
Okay, well, that's about it, Paul, that I have. Do you have any questions, or how do people get in touch with you?
Oh, yes. Email is probably the best. fiddlerpaul71. I can put the email in the text on here. How's that sound? So you have
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Yeah, and I if I could, I'd like to mention, again, I'm very, very thankful for all the people who have helped me doing this. And that includes all the people who, like you, who ask me about it, who tell people about it. That's part of spreading the news. That's part of spreading the music, and that's what it's all about: spreading the music. But all the people that have played with me, Stephen Rapp, the banjo player that is with me, he's very faithful as a musical comrade. He's always there, always willing to try anything I'm wanting to do, whether it's a low tuning, whether it's a alternate tuning, whether it's a strange tune. and Sean Finn, the guy you see on the guitar in a lot of my videos too. And then I've obviously been doing a lot more collaborations since COVID. You know, being able to get together with people as often. So did a lot of collaborations like that. But I couldn't do it if it wasn't for all of that.
Yeah. Do you compose anything, Paul?
I do, actually. Not so much lately. I mean, I have, and I do have some more recent tunes. There was a time that when I was really, really cranking out a lot of folk tunes. 2008 to 2009, I've written over 500 tunes.
Wow.
Quite a lot of tunes. They're more in a Celtic kind of vein, though. A little more influences were a lot of Irish, Scottish, French, Canadian type, Acadians, that type of stuff. English country dance music, even a lot of that kind of stuff. And a lot of the tunes I used to play a lot. I taught a lot of people. People play them. I used to write tunes for people, not necessarily for myself, but other people. Right. And a lot of the community in Albany, New York, they play a lot of those tunes even to this day, from what I understand. So. Wow.
That's interesting. I actually decompose. I don't compose, but I decompose. I'm just kidding.
We all have our straights, right, Mike?
Yeah. That's interesting. That's great. You have such a wealth of information about, you can rattle off these old time players. It's fascinating to me. It's very interesting. I would really like to get some Skype lessons from you and see what, your bowing is incredible. The way you bow and everything. I do straight bowing, Texas fiddling, long bow. Really, my teacher wouldn't deviate. You play it like this and that's it.
I would like my approach then. I give you a little flavor for that. Bowing is a big thing that I focus on. Not because I make people do it, but in order to get a certain sound that you are looking for, there are certain possibilities we have with bowing. Okay, and so I present bowing to my students as it's a technique, and I teach you these techniques, and I call it, you have all these things. Your bag of tricks is what I call it. So you have your bag of tricks there, and you have these certain bowing patterns that you go back to and you call on. And I can show you a tune, and this is how we start out, show you a tune and say, these are the bowings that I do. And for you to kind of really incorporate those bowings into you, repetition. Think about it. When something is new to us, how do we learn it, especially this music? It's by doing it. It's by repetition.
Yes,
there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of repetition. The more we do something, the harder we think about it. The less we think about it, it becomes part of us eventually. So now you have these bowings that are a part of you. So I break down the tunes into bowing patterns so that now you can look at some tunes that you play that you've already played in the past, or new tunes that you're learning yourself, and you can apply these bowings to them yourself. I teach concepts rather than spoon feeding bowings. I mean, I do that as well. Like I say, I'll teach a tune and this is the bowing. Yeah. But the overall goal is to teach you concepts so that you can actually learn stuff on your own. You're not dependent on your teacher to give you the information. Yeah. It goes a lot further that way. And people seem to really, really concentrate and focus on that very well. That's the first thing people always ask. It's bowings. And another thing I'll try kind of leave you with is people think that the bowings make the music and give them their groove. It doesn't make it. Think about it this way. Say I wrote the music down for a classical violinist, and I wrote down the exact bowings that I use. Are they going to sound like me playing it? No. It's not the exact bowings. There's a lot more of that. It's bow usage. It's bow stroke. It's a combination of those things, okay? But it does not make your groove. The bowings assist your groove. They help you along in your groove. They don't make it, though. But they
right. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I believe that. That makes sense.
For sure.
Wow. Yeah.
Think about it. Another point that fully illustrates that is, we all know we'll be in a jam and you'll have 5 fiddlers playing the same tune. Everybody's bowing is a little different.
Yeah.
you're rarely going to have two people that are doing this. You might do certain little patterns that are the same, but you're not going to bow that tune the whole way. Is it any better or worse, one person doing this bowing as opposed to that bowing?
No.
It's their groove. It depends on how it depends on their groove and how that bowing assists their groove.
Right. Wow, that's great. That's good information.
Yeah, if you would like to explore some lessons, you might let me know, and we'll get something set up. And yeah,
okay,
that'd be awesome.
Well, yeah. Also, what do you charge, Paul, for a normal person?
I charge $45 for an hour lesson. That is below. Yeah, it's very reasonable. It is below the rate of many other people.
Oh yeah.
And it isn't because you get anything less. If anything, you're probably going to get more with me. I do it for a couple of reasons. One, I feel like I need to help spread the music. If somebody wants to learn the music, I want to teach them. But I also have to understand that this is my livelihood as well. So I have to be fair to myself as well.
Right.
Early on, when I was in college and still, my first year in college, I was teaching at the Cleveland Music School Settlement. And the Cleveland Music School Settlement was founded, I believe it was 1912. And they were founded on the principle that music should be available to all who want to learn it. Same thing as our art museum here in Cleveland. We have a world-renowned art museum. It's a wonderful art museum. It's free. And some people hear that it's free, they think it's not good. It's wonderful. And that was exactly the same point. They said art should be accessible and free to all. You shouldn't have to be wealthy in order to benefit from what art gives us all. It's the same with music. So early on in teaching, I learned that concept that, and in Cleveland Music School Settlement would work on either a sliding scale or, again, it depended, if the needs of a student, they would get scholarships so they didn't have to pay. So I have always thought that was very, very important in teaching music and helping people. And that's what it boils down to. It boils down to helping people, enriching people's lives, and seeing that the music continues to live. At the same time, being fair to myself and, understanding that I have to make a living from this. So that's kind of how I view music.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. We'll get together and talk about this, and we'll I'd like to get some lessons going on.
Awesome.
Mainly for bowing and understanding some of the old time stuff and just, in general.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, that's it, Paul, that I have. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.
All right, Mike.